Nate, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It is good to have you on. And everybody, if you guys are watching or clicking on later, thank you for watching as well. None of my videos from earlier saved at all. And it started storming. And it was kind of cool because I was reading the account of the Verdan sharpshooters at the Catherine Furnace as it was thundering and like you could see the light. It was like nice and sunny, and dude, this cloud rolls in, it gets so dark. And I'm like, just getting like with it. I was like, this is awesome. And then I'm like, yo, this wasn't recording at all.
All that
I was like, I was
beauty,
exhausted. I was
perfection.
proud of myself, like running on very little sleep, mind you, just like threw all of that out. And I was like, hell yeah, this is awesome. And no, I said, I didn't press the red button, man.
Are there
That was it.
backup cameras? Is there a thing as backup cameras
If
possible?
there is, they need to happen over here. Because I was like, I didn't even care at the moment because like it really did start getting ready to rain pretty bad. And I was like, dude, come on. I had this perfect. I guess that's how you lose them. You get them like that for a sec, and then they out.
I mean, in my mind, I always like to imagine the perfect shot of me with a book, right? Typically Grant's memoirs. I like to imagine just like sitting on the top of a mountain, but sadly, I
Right.
never have a camera and I'm really not that
John,
photogenic.
my co-host here, he popped in too for us. He said that it was a good read. So I appreciate that. I thought it was a powerful one too for a minute because I like with the storm that was kind of cool to read and just kind of hear back and little and just think about standing at Catherine's Furnace and being able to have that storm coming. So I wish I could have gotten that. But you're right. I know I didn't even think to have a backup camera, but we have the material to do it, so we might as well. So we had two tripods. Why didn't we do that? I think it was just like in the moment, man. It was cool. Conversations get going. You're in the spot. You're just like, I can't help it.
Yeah, I
That's
what I need to have my students to do is just like take like random shots of me like as I'm like teaching or if like I'm reading or something like
right.
that. That's my backup camera, and sometimes they take photos even when I don't ask them
So
to.
it's like they're voluntold, or it's just almost like a given. It kind of comes with it, but it's not on paper
Right.
and
Yeah,
unwritten rule. I like it. Okay, see, but at least you got that safety net.
I do. It's a safety net. Sometimes I don't want that safety net, but hey,
At least you're not risking bears and lightning to
that
not press a red button, man. I was like, God, I had to have it where something. But the live video, hey Clinton, I appreciate that. I'm glad that the live video was good. I still working on the mic, but again, trial and error. I don't care. That's how I'm gonna test it. I'm just gonna go live on a battlefield and be like, hey, if it works, awesome. Let me know. If not, let me know too. But that brings us to our topic. This is the first, and I want to call it experimental, but I think it's also something I really want to kind of keep up because I already like how it's going so far. But trench talk, we just come here and trench talk, like exactly what it says. It's Thursday, is it not? Today's Wednesday.
yeah.
Oh, it's about to be Thursday in 4 hours. So now maybe it could be a Thursday thing. I don't care.
I
Days
lose
of the
track
week.
of days during the summer, so
Yeah, it was. I don't really think there's a W I'm going to use. I think trench talk's just cool. Keep it like that as a
yeah.
segment. But
I think
I
this would
mean,
be cooler if we were like actually in a trench, like if we were actually in one. I don't know how you get a good camera shot of that, but
have to have
like
some good shade. You would have to.
they could just do like bird's eye view, like just the heads, top of the heads. But
You could. I mean, yeah, you could.
I
You could.
don't know how
That
they talk
that's
about World War One. But you actually, I think you mentioned a book here to me just a minute ago, and you were like showing me some of the images in that book. Pretty gruesome, by the way. Uh, there was. It seems to be that at least in my view, 1864 I always see as pivotal, and typically we say, oh, it's a catalyst, it's a turning point in the war. Grant is put in charge, whatever. And I would I'd say differently. I'd say it's because of the strong use of breastworks, field fortifications, entrenchments, you name it. You don't see anything like this before 1864, and maybe that's possibly why. Um, it seems like it's a lot easier, and even for me, it was easier to follow the war before using these fortifications because they actually fought in a more traditional and what I'll call like a Eurocentric way, where
Yeah,
armies meet on a field. They retreat. You typically know who the winner is just by standing there. But fortifications just change the game entirely.
they do. Oh, absolutely. I think soldiers have to learn to adapt to that change too, in the way that they're doing, and that's your prior discussion earlier about Emery Upton.
Mhm.
um, and I think that's one of the reasons initially I really clung to his tactical genius. I mean, that's it's plain as day. I'm going to say it. I think that's kind of why. And again, I'm not giving him credit for everything, but just saying it makes a soldier when you have to implement this new type of warfare on
Yeah,
top of
and
already adapting to what really was outdated already to begin with. So it's like you're unlearning something just to have to learn a whole another new concept of warfare. So
well,
there's got to be a bit of a patience to it, or a time. I think it's something that goes with time to unlearn something like that, especially doing that for 3.5 years, or you're so used to being fired at in one way, it's almost mechanical with the troops at that point. And that's
yeah,
how you're seeing some of what they would say. Well, why is he still doing frontal assaults, or why are they still moving to the right? Well, you go right every time you get shot at in that direction for 3.5 years, okay, and then tell me you're not going to go right when you get shot at. So there's an adaptation. I think trenches really show that because they're not able to execute some of the maneuvers maybe they were so famous for making. And also, it doesn't help that Gettysburg just happened, and most of the people able to execute those maneuvers aren't there. So
yeah.
that's a big thing too. And other battles, of course, you have like Chickamauga out in Georgia. You have other the Chattanooga Lookout Mountain. There's so many different campaigns that really factor into that as well. But I think it all comes back to fortifications from there, though, because the remaining men have to now endure what started formulating at Chancellorsville, even before that at Yorktown. I mean, we can go all day when they formulated, but I think to the tradition that we're seeing in the Battle of the Wilderness, where we're literally seeing like mock-ups of World War One literally right in front of our eyes. I mean, I think it's experimental as hell. And I sent you the map earlier. It wasn't just to show you the road, but those
Mhm.
trenches that you
No.
saw, and I wish I could pull up a picture here of it, but the trenches that you saw, they're called galleries, and they literally look just like that. We have no idea what they're there for, really, other than the fact that it could be regimental concentration. Maybe you're breaking it off by companies. But I mean, if I take you back through some time, these trenches are huge. And they're really deep, and I mean they're still well defined, but they're not long. They're very very short. So it's almost like the traverses you're seeing at the Bloody Angle, where they're literal pens. They're so small.
Mhm.
And I think all of this is experimental again. This is new. This isn't fighting that they're used to yet. And they're finding ways to now defend against that too. And so there's experimental things happening out there because they're not the works that were built at the wilderness.
No. And
They may look similar, but they're not.
the so I'm gonna add something on here.
And real quick, John, if you want to join the go, let me know. All you gotta do is send you the link. We can all do trench talk. It would be cool. Just let us know.
Oh, you're inviting John on?
Yeah,
Oh, no, not
Bruce.
that guy.
Oh man. Yeah, not that
No, I'm
guy.
just kidding. I'm
I
playing.
figured. Yeah, John, if you're on and you want to just let me know, I'll send you the link and you can pop
Yeah.
in.
So the weird thing about like trench warfare, and I had recommended this book earlier to you, but it's called the Rocky Road to the Great War, and it's all about trench
Yeah, we
warfare.
talked about that last night.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited.
pre World War One, and so trench warfare is it's it's weird how it developed, right? I mean, this is something we see in the 16th,
Mhm.
17th centuries. It really doesn't show up until 18th, 19th centuries. And typically they were just like these long stretches, right? The most popular, I believe, is the lines of Torres Vedras, which are the lines that protected the capital of Lisbon during the Napoleonic Wars. And it was these lines that the French were unable to penetrate.
Mm.
And they heavily defended Lisbon. There was just no way of trying to get around them or anything of the sort because they anchored, uh, well, on the ocean, and then of course uh, towards Spain itself. So really, these lines though, they're long trench work. There's fortresses. There's all this stuff is involved with them, and as we move into the American Civil War, the fortifications are actually much more movable, meaning
Mm.
you actually see them built hastily, more quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time to build them. And so we actually see them, and we also talked about Earl Hess, and I really recommend his works on
Absolutely.
trenches and field fortifications. But he really goes into good detail about this. And Robert E. Lee used these field fortifications during the 7 Days campaign. Um, but he used them in a very interesting way.
Mm.
He had them as like essentially launching points, but and Lee shouldn't be blamed for this, but typically the way you attack trench works and even before this, I mean Napoleon even did this. You typically just keep attacking them, okay, until that line breaks, until you take that breastwork, that redoubt, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. Battle of Borodino, Napoleon launched attack, attack, attack against the redoubts. Um, so that's typically how it was. But by 1864, the armies are like 30, 25 yards apart sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, they're digging real close to each other
I
at points,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
mean, we've never seen this, and
Mm.
Earl Hess calls it continuous contact, and he says it's the only new grand tactic that ever came out of the Civil War.
Interesting.
Um,
He calls it the only new grand
so operational tactic, right? So sorry, yeah.
No, it's
I
okay, so I was making sure I had it right, okay.
Yeah, so and there's like new innovative tactics, what have you, but
Mm.
this is operational. And so basically what's happening, right, is these forces are in contact with each other every day. If you read the OR, you're going to typically
Absolutely.
find reports of, oh, well, there's skirmishing going on around this area, even though there's not a
And they're not
battle.
it's not even little skirmishing though, that's the thing. I mean, like,
Yeah,
this could be a
and,
full-on firefight for 4 hours just trench to trench, depending on
well,
which overland campaign battle you're even at.
and,
Even at Cold Harbor, Spotsylvania, I mean, it's every single one of them. It
right,
doesn't
and
stop.
I had talked to Chris Mikowski,
Mm.
and I had told him, I said, I don't know if we can even like label. It's really hard to label the battles like who won tactically, like at the very lowest level, because each day is its own engagement. And so if
Sure.
someone really wants to make a book and just write about who wins tactically each day,
Right.
you probably could. But you would also have to break it up in which front that was won or lost, because
Mm.
sometimes they might win on one side, they might lose on the other side. I mean, because of this continuous contact and these field fortifications are just, I mean, they're popping up everywhere. It makes it almost impossible to get away. And
Yeah.
and by the way, Lee hates it. I know I everyone a lot of people I
I mean,
talk
yeah,
to.
he's not wanting to throw all the lives of his men up there just to make another trench, and he knows he has to do that, though. I agree with
Oh
you, I
yeah,
don't think he
yeah.
likes that. I mean, I think that's a given too, but a lot of people get just throw that over their head, sorta how they throw that label on Grant that he's a butcher too. Let's back up for a minute and still kind of look at the people as who they are, and let's look at their humanity too, and they just sort of their personality on the battlefield. Do you really think Lee is over here kind of ignoring the fact that he is literally throwing more men into the fray at the Bloody Angle or at the Muleshoe? There's no tactical hold that he really has in that other than crunching numbers for time. And it's really it says how desperate he is because he's throwing those numbers there knowing he's not getting those back. Grant's okay with throwing those again, it doesn't make much, but he knows because not only are they replaceable, but he knows also the kind of what's at the end of that table there, what's at the end of the finish line, and in order to get to that, there are some things that you're gonna have to go to and get done that aren't necessarily the most pretty.
Well,
And that
and
happened, and that really, I think, culminates there at that small piece of land, on top of the obvious fact that it's just a funnel anyways, when we wanna talk about fortifications. If you've ever stood and seen it, the Bloody Angle,
the
like,
oh, yeah, I was there,
oh,
pretty
good,
recently, and it was really
good.
cool to look at the whole thing and, kind of the
Can you understand where I call it a funnel, and
yes.
how that kind of transpires? So, I don't know if you, and I tell a lot of people, I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but I've kind of looked at this trend for years now, and when they mow it, they do a real good job because it exposes 2 other lines that you don't normally see.
Mhm.
And then they're doing a better job too on the left-hand side, because now on the left-hand side, you're also getting a lot of the skirmish lines that are in front of the angle. So ones that you would think would have abattis in it, but are just like rifle pits, and there's obstructions in front of it to hide the rifle pits. So there's a lot of stuff going on when it comes to digging in. I think it's really cool that this is all just being experimented with, and maybe they had time to do it on Clark's Mountain because, what else are they doing? So sure, there's like the digging techniques have been in play. You have all winter to do that, and you're not going to be doing it too long. Because once that soil, especially in Virginia, gets stiff, you're not digging.
Mhm.
That season's over. But
Well,
that's the thing. They have that experience, I believe, from that fall up to, like, yeah, the mine run time span, somewhere around there. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
when
yeah, yeah.
things start to, spring forward, no pun intended, when it comes to the wilderness. That seriously wasn't intended. As soon as I said I heard, like, that coming, I was like,
Spring
"Oh, that's
forward,
the no
yeah,
pun intended,
yeah.
spring forward."
No, I think you were trying to be clever.
I really wasn't. I would've been like, "Oh, that was good, wasn't it?" I really
Yeah,
was an
no,
accident. It
no.
wasn't clever. It was
You don't need to
purely
be it's okay. You don't need to be humble.
my stomach
Just
hurts.
just own it. Just own it.
I would own it if I could. I don't have any way to own that. I wish I
Um
did, but
No,
I
well, hey, that spring, ultimately turned into summer and then fall to winter, um, but and a
seasons
lot
move
of that a lot of
fast.
that had to do with entrenchments, and look, the whole thing is there's a reason why I wanna focus specifically on entrenchments and breastworks, and that is because I and this is my own personal opinion, but I personally believe that Grant understood them better than a lot of people give him credit for. I mean, the idea of field fortifications in his orders comes up immediately following the first engagement at Spotsylvania Courthouse, and by the way, this part is really impressive, right? So he tells everyone, hold your advanced lines, hold those positions, right? Dig in where you're at. And basically, what he's going to do is he's just going to try to, and he does this at Cold Harbor. I always like to point this out. He actually tries to besiege the Army of Northern Virginia, where there's no city, there's there's no fortress, there's nothing. He decides to take up siege tactics against the Army of Northern Virginia at Cold Harbor. So there's talk about using a mine, there's talk about digging tunnels underneath the ground. I mean,
So we're seeing this before Petersburg even.
all of this. Yeah. And Grant
Interesting.
considers it. And that is actually how he is able to later withdraw his troops from there and then again turn his flank, because of the fact he's able to use them so effectively, because he knows
Mm,
that even though he's struggling to break Lee's line, any time that Lee has ever come out of his entrenchments, he's lost. He's been repelled in every single engagement where he has come out from the entrenchments. Not once did he has he ever succeeded. And I think that's
yeah,
where
that makes sense.
that's why Lee hates it. And his troops are beginning to lose their elan. They're beginning to lose their ability to launch this offensive um, against the Federals. And even in Murray's work, he talks
Mhm.
about how he interprets what Grant says after North Anna in a very different way, because Grant had said famously, right? Lee's army is whipped, and typically we're like, oh well, he was wrong
Yeah,
because
he had one more day, but,
right.
yeah,
But ultimately,
he had the gist of it down. He was
this
whipped. There wasn't, like,
this historian though
mm,
says, well, actually, Grant was right, because what Grant is saying here, they can't win a battle outside of the entrenchments. Like Grant is
Yeah.
essentially viewing this as, hey, he's lost his offensive capacity at this point. Like I've done my job, but I need to do more. And that's how he interprets it, at least.
Mm.
And I agree with parts of it, other parts I don't agree with. But needless to say, I do think, especially going into Petersburg,
I think
um,
offensively, I mean, and are we looking out of context too? What is Grant using that in the context as? Is he talking about Lee going on an offensive? Sure,
right.
he has a few in him, but it's not any type of like offensive Lee that we see in 62 or 63 by any means.
Yeah,
It is
no,
a
and
completely different Lee. At Fort Harrison, even when I think he personally leads a charge to try and retake the fort, and there's no getting it back. But he he's different. There's no more Lee that
no,
we're familiar with in the sense
and
of Lee. It's
you
a whipped man, as they call it.
you
Or as
could
Grant
make
called it.
you could make the argument. I mean, and I know, look, there's still like a whole other year of war left, but the wilderness is like everything, and we had just talked about this.
Yeah.
Um, but but the wilderness is like the battle that Grant wins. JFC Fuller, who's like a
I think
military
it's
theorist.
wilderness and Spotsylvania as a whole. That
Yeah,
that whole entire thing is
and
really
that's
it.
probably
Because
right.
as much as a slaughter that Cold Harbor was, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, tactically and strategically, what?
Yeah, it didn't really
What
like
did
they
it what did it accomplish that it didn't at Spotsylvania? What did you realistically do? Are you going to do the DNA strand again? Yes, you are.
and
Maybe.
I want to say this though, because as a Cold Harbor guy, I will
Oh,
say
please,
I
I am
think
very lacking. That's why I'm honestly asking from what I know, the little I know, I don't see an overall reason to say that this was tactically important
it's so tactically,
to
it is just like the
gaining
wilderness,
ground.
like Spotsy. It doesn't like, and in fact, tactically, it's not even as important. Okay,
Mm,
but operationally, it's everything because
I can see
without
that.
him being able to disengage and then steal a march on lead to Petersburg and then pinning his army in Petersburg, he cannot like Lee can't move anymore. And I know
Mm,
typically everyone is like, oh well, he let go of Jubal Early and Jubal Early's out in
yeah,
the Shenandoah. That was before Petersburg.
it
That was
was, yeah.
before Lee was in Petersburg. And in fact, Lee had a very, very hard time, like, you know, letting Kershaw's division go out into the valley, bringing him back in. He had a hard time shifting forces around because he had to make sure he kept Petersburg and he kept Richmond. It was almost impossible, but somehow he did it. But Grant then could focus on, he's like, he did probably the cruelest thing ever, which is he's like, okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna make you watch the rest of the Confederacy burn around you. No biggie, but that's what I'm
Nice.
gonna do.
You're gonna watch it.
Um, so
Mind game already.
right. And by the way, it's messing with the soldiers in Petersburg because they're
Sure,
getting
the
letters from their
Petersburg
wives.
Regiment. You need to read the Petersburg Regiment by John Horton if you haven't already.
Yeah, and I've seen all the awards it's gotten. And I know I need to. He's done a really good job,
Yeah,
and
it's I've got it over here because that's when I reenact. I actually belong to the 12th Virginia Infantry. I like to try to
I'm
hang out with
I'm
those guys.
I'm actually going through his work on the Fourth Offensive in August.
Let me know how that is. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
interested in that.
It's good. So he has a he has a lot of good detail just about the troop engagements.
Mm,
Even at the tactical level, it's really good, really good. But needless to say, I in terms of if we're shifting how trenches look from the Overland campaign to the Petersburg campaign, it's really significant. And I think you had even mentioned this, right? The wilderness, the I think the only like breastworks or field fortifications they really used was the Confederates used fallen timber, right? They were able to build some, and then of course Hancock was able to dig his troops in before the Confederate counterattack. So,
sure.
um, I compare that with, oh well, right before the mine, There's just no comparison,
No,
and
not necessarily. You could be in.
no.
You can get like battery 5. No, there's no comparison. Never mind. No, you're good. You've got a very valid point. I'm trying to even think like Colquitt Salient, maybe just a little bit. That's not even that's June. Is that June 15th? Or is that the
Uh,
8? What's the 18th? Because they say it's like a mini offensive, but it goes horrible for some heavy artillery. It's his first Massachusetts
yes,
movie. Is
yes.
that what it is? Yeah.
Mhm.
Dude, they
But
get it so bad.
I know, yeah.
When I
And
was walking back down there, I was like, "Oh, no." Like, you have some protection and a half down there, man. I mean, they said like, they undermine it. There's like it's a gully with I'm like, "A gentle swale gully."
hey,
No.
they were still hoping it was the empty trenches
Mm.
like it was on June 15th. But I will say,
Eh,
and maybe this explains the high casualties for the attacker, right? Because keep in mind, there's like there's some military theory out there that says you have to have a 3-to-1 ratio attacking entrenched positions.
heard
Otherwise,
that.
they're basically doomed to fail. And this, and by the way, I think what's impressive is they're attacking these entrenchments with just infantry. Okay, in World War One, they would just shell the crap out of these positions before they would assault them. They would
Sure.
just shell them to high hell. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But needless to say, these generals in the Civil War, they're like, go, there, go there. Um,
Just point and say, "Hey, this is where you're headed, buddy. Better hope
mhm.
you got it."
Yep, and this is where Upton comes in, right? He's like, "Well, if we tell them
Mhm.
to cap their guns, if we, do all this, it'll work."
I like his deception at Rappahannock Station where it's just like, "I have 4 brigades." Shut
Yep.
down to what, like 2 regiments? Not even 2, I think it's 1.
Well, even at Fort
Awesome.
Harrison, right? They're like, "Okay, just don't carry anything that's heavy, like, don't bring artillery, nothing. Just
Quick,
go as fast as
in,
you
out.
can."
Not even out, in, hold, stay. We got you.
Have you
Yeah, but you have to reinforce that though, and I think that's the hesitation too, is there's so many assaults that have taken place. I mean, and again, the guys were shaking 3 years of that habit off again. You got Grant who's gonna fight. You've got him going down those roads. That's why I always think there's just this absolute, like, apocryphal meaning behind him going down the Rock Road south towards Spotsylvania as it's burning and leading troops as there's a cheer because it's signifying that there's a vast different army moving south now. It's not McClellan and it's not the ones prior. Grant's gonna fight him. I mean, and it's a visual reminder there with that. And with knowing Grant's going to fight him, that's where I think the experimental side of warfare comes
Mhm.
into play because correct me if I'm wrong. I think Grant's growing as a commander, as a unofficial commander of the Army of the Potomac,
Yes. I
growing as
don't
a
know if
president
you've
too.
ever watched the, documentary on Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. Have you ever seen
Mm-mm,
that?
I'm not.
Okay. So, there's actually a scene in that, and this is important because it relates
Mm,
to Grant's
sure.
generalship, and so there was actually a really famous basketball player that played Jordan in like a one-on-one scrimmage just kind of early on in his career. And this basketball player said, he's like, "Look, when we first started the game, like when we first started playing, like I knew like I was better than him.
Right.
But at the end of the game, when I'm looking up at the scoreboard, he was better than me after playing one game." And I kind of look at that a little bit like Grant. Like Grant is really scary in this regard, and I think this is where people always kind of
Sure.
underestimate him. Is he
He'll
for
do
some
any.
reason
Yeah.
he can read people, and I don't know how, I don't know why, um, but it's true. So, so even at Fort Donelson, okay, right? We have Buckner,
Mhm.
who he was the one that was forced to surrender to Grant, and Buckner was after he was captured. He was telling Grant, he's like, "Well, if I had been in charge, you wouldn't have taken this fort." And Grant tells him, he goes, "If I knew you were in charge, I would have changed my plan entirely." And it's just like it goes to show that like Grant thinks about people, right? And he thinks about um, how they act. I mean, even when he meets Lee at Appomattox Courthouse, he says, "Hey, do you remember me? Because I remember you from the Mexican American War." And
Right.
their interaction is like so limited in the Mexican American War, at least from what we know. And you're kind of looking at that and you're like, and even Lee, he says, I don't, I don't remember you. Now, he might have wanted to just go ahead and sign the papers and get it over with, but needless to say, like Grant has this kind of like scary memory, like I don't know. At least that's how I view it, and I would
Yeah.
say absolutely, he's growing as a commander, and this definitely isn't the Western theater. He does not have the ability to maneuver like he did um, during Fort Donelson, during even during the Vicksburg campaign.
Mhm.
And you can make the argument, well, he really didn't have that much room to maneuver because he couldn't go overland and he had to go by the Mississippi River. But once he was off from the Mississippi River, of course, he had all the room to maneuver that he wanted. He didn't get that in Virginia. He had like just kind of,
Yeah.
he was just trying to get
Like
between
we've said,
Richmond
it's
and
like
Lee.
that they how they bounce around. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of maneuverability, but he does at the same time. He's arcing some maneuverability, if you will. I mean, you get
Mhm.
just playing words here just to visualize it, but yeah, he doesn't. He's having to move by a flank, and that's what he's holding on
Yes.
to as he's moving through this campaign. So that's something to consider too when we're looking at Grant and some of the talent behind that too. And I always just am in utter shock every year when I come up with the anniversary of that pontoon that's built to get across the James and the efficiency and how fast it is just readily available to go across. I mean, where's that in '62? Like this new energy comes with Grant. It does. I agree with this train on Grant and the Overland campaign. I do think that he's responsible for a lot of the morale. Just like I give credit to Hooker at Chancellorsville. Even before, so I think, and I honestly, I think it's crazy to say this that he's one of the most respectable commanders of the Army of the Potomac, and I only say it because of this. He's one of the only ones that has legitimately owned his battlefield loss. He
Oh,
will
Hooker?
tell you
Yeah.
straight to your face, honestly, I lost faith in myself and I could no longer fully execute it. I was just kind of winging it. Nobody would admit that
Well,
was their fault and they were continuously doing it, which, come on, Pope, we're really going to say Pope wasn't winging it?
he kind
Pope
of
was winging
pulled
it.
he pulled a McGregor, right? I mean, like he's like big talk, right? He's
There
like
you go.
he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I should just be dictator. Like, I should just run this country. Like, yeah, I'm gonna kick Lee's butt. I'm gonna go hard.
Yeah.
Like,
He's going to run an entire, like, just war campaign on citizens. I mean, Pope was tough. People did not like Pope,
he
and
was
rightfully so. It's like Butler. Butler was tough. People didn't
he
like
was
Butler.
tough. And Butler doesn't get enough credit as much as he should. I like Butler. That's just me. I like Butler though.
I mean, I can see why he gets just thrown up on like every wrong attack though, and just like how is he supposed to take everything he can support Walthall Junction?
Which
Which
by the
time?
way, his Bermuda 100 campaign, he accomplished all of his objectives except one, and
Yeah, it
that
was
one
impressive. And
is
it's
the
sad
one
there's
thing.
nothing left to even be like, do you see what he accomplished? I mean, there's
Yeah,
not anything left. You're
it's
going in parking lots and stuff now. It's
yeah,
sad
it's
because Bermuda 100 could be some really cool battlefield stuff,
oh yeah,
at least
absolutely.
site-wise.
And actually, I was going to ask you, is the James River crossing preserved by the NPS at all?
You know, I believe it is. I am not familiar with that. I've never been to that, and I've been all over that Petersburg. There's still a lot of places in Petersburg I have yet to see.
There you
It's
go. I
it's
think
what I'm learning this year a lot alongside of my research projects. Petersburg's definitely something I pick up. Gettysburg's Review minus the Masterson Brown book that came out. I'm really enjoying that. It's giving me a new perspective on Meade, and I think it's cool to. If you're not a
oh
Gettysburg
yes.
fan, I understand it. Don't read it just for the Gettysburg thing, but definitely read it to understand a decision making Meade because Grant does overshadow that, and I think that you can get an idea of some of the decisions that Mead is pitching to Grant and why Mead does have like visual frustrations and he gets the name like the goddamn Google-eyed, goggle-eyed snapping turtle, whatever they call him. You get these names because I think there is an effort that he's trying to portray. And this name could have came much earlier in the war too, from my memory serves me right. I think it actually does. But nonetheless, I think too that that's kind of something to look at. So don't read it just again. I know a lot of people that are Gettysburg. I got you. I understand. I was there too at one point, but not only am I reading it for Gettysburg, but as someone who does avidly study the Oberlin campaign and kind of the Meade. I don't touch him. I don't understand Meade. Honestly, I have to come out and like. There's some things that I question about George Meade. There's things that I question about Grant Lee. I question about them all. But it's a
And
wonderful.
and that's
Wonderful.
why we if it, okay. Okay.
Stuff. Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
So I will say, like, if I think I think Mead should have owned the snapping turtle comment. I think on his flag, like his
Especially at
flag,
Fredericksburg. Like he should have
they,
owned that. Prospect
right?
Hill.
Like he should have just like
It's
put
all
that
him.
on his flag, like snapping turtle. Okay, and then right? But instead, I
Meade's got
love
numbers.
when Grant goes to his tank
It's like a
and
Picasso.
he's like, "Where's Caesar?"
Dude, it
Because
is. It's
like
like I
so
mean, there's
glorious.
soldiers mentioning this too on over on Houndsborough Ridge over there in Culpeper. There's like, well, we were so imperial about our army. Now we're like having golden. It's interesting how the army is just formulating into 64.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. I love Mead for many reasons. He's just fun, and also I think I do think Grant really respected him, and there's
Mm.
evidence of that with his recommendation of him being of his promotion alongside Sherman, and he even said, "I don't want one getting promoted without the other." And so even though Meade may not have liked his boss looking over his shoulder like every step of the
He
way,
should consider himself lucky.
yeah, like
He
in Meade,
stayed in for the duration of the war, man.
he survived the Overland Campaign, Petersburg, and Appomattox. Who else survived that?
Warren didn't survive Five Forks.
Yeah, yep, yep.
That do you know a lot about that?
Oh, do you want me to talk about that? Because people might hate me if I talk about
Maybe
that.
let me read more on it. I'm gonna say because I'm learning. I just
um,
started going to that site,
I will
and
say
I'm not full like, I guess, in
I will
a
only say this
good
one
grip.
thing. Warren did very, very well during the Petersburg campaign. He
See,
did very
I
well.
I hate Sheridan, so I automatically want to say that I've kind of thought deep down, and my hate. I'm sorry, I'm not a Sheridan
No,
fan.
you're good because like I'm like one of the few people
You like Sheridan?
that really like Sheridan because I have
I have a
a
reason.
framed picture of Sheridan just for you, and I will send this to you, and you can put it up on your desk.
Might as well put Stonewall on my desk. The only really interesting painting I have is actually Prospect Hill. I don't know if it's hard to see with the camera and stuff, but it's Pilgrim's Battery actually on top of Prospect
Okay.
Hill with the nets. I was like, you can't go to Gettysburg and tell them, hey, it's $60. I'm like, something about Prospect Hill is okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Especially, yeah, something about Prospect. It looks the same as it does today too. I love that when you go out to Prospect, you get a really good view.
I think what is underappreciated is it when you can go to Battlefield today and it looks almost exactly the same.
It's great.
So
It's great for
underappreciated.
interpretation too.
Yes. And maybe that is why I am so thankful for the parts that are preserved around Petersburg, where the entrenchments are actually still showing. And I
Mm.
know that there's been um, a lot has changed. The ground has shifted. I get that. But I have to give a lot of props for the areas that still show some of that. And so you can get some idea as to what it would have looked like. And
It's some
so I,
take what you can get, yeah.
right. And like you can actually like view and picture kind of what they were seeing, what they were
But
thinking.
you want to fight for it too. To win some, lose some isn't really the attitude to have towards that. I'm thinking about, I'm like, no, that's not my attitude. I'd fight for that thing too. 'Cause they're like, "You losing forever?" No. We could preserve that thing, man. That's incredible that, there are battlefields out there that have been just threatened like that, that were almost gone.
Yeah,
So
well, and we had
Petersburg doesn't have the attention that some of these major campaigns have.
they don't,
So
and
you're not gonna get that immediate draw to preserve this large
mhm,
chunk of land, and it's gonna right. So like yeah, exciting. And I'm serious too. I'm not even being sarcastic. It is so exciting for these new parcels of land that are being taken in by different organizations, and it's awesome to see that. And Petersburg, you might get that chunk, which again, thankful for, absolutely thankful for, but it never has the draw that some
mhm,
of these others do.
and and it's just so different, right? I mean, they're bringing in so many things on trains. I mean, uh, they even have City Point, right,
Yeah,
preserved. I mean, even though there was no
visitation's probably
like,
slim on that. I'm not sure I have numbers, but yeah,
yeah, there's no engagement there, but it was so important. Without City Point, you don't have Petersburg. It, so it's just so different. You even
Oop,
have
Bojack,
some
thank you.
trenches built very quickly during the Appomattox campaign. Not nearly as much because the Appomattox campaign is what Grant had wanted since May,
Mhm.
last May, like 1864 May. But still, there's still some of that that's going on, and I think those battlefields need to continue to be preserved. And we had almost started complaining about Hotshot before we got on. Um,
Don't want to get into
so,
that one. No,
yeah, so I think that um, I'm glad there's like this kind of. I feel like there's a renewed effort. Don't you feel like there's a renewed effort?
I think so. There's a spurt. I think I do,
Okay,
and I hope. I really do.
same, same. I
I
feel the
really
same
do.
way, but
Yeah,
I don't know for sure.
we're gonna
Um,
find out. I mean,
I
we need it. We need to have some type of push at least because we need to have a group or a generation that we know is actually going to do something.
mhm. And I have and look, living in Kansas City, the one thing I understand is look, the Battle of Westport took place here, but there is nothing here. Okay. They have Loose Park, and at Loose Park, you can see a battery and a plaque that describes the Battle of Westport. And that's it. Um,
It's just like a
so
Civil War trail sign for us.
right. So it's really so for that, and I don't want to sit on or speak at the podium here, but
Mm.
really, I think it's important. I think it's really significant that it is preserved, and I especially with these entrenchments. Like I know that if they are on private property, I know that people typically there's some degree where people have actually like bulldozed them because they want to do something on that like area, and that just like inside of me I just
I
break a
agree.
little bit more. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we do need to film before it goes. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, we need to do that soon.
I totally agree. Don't
Lots
forget
of reading.
forget to bring the backup camera. Always need a backup camera.
So
I think it is
mad, dude. I had Regiment. It was so good. One of these days, I'll go back there and I'll film it because I think I can do that. But I mean, I just
you should
nothing's
go do
gonna beat
that
that
with
storm
the
rolling in.
tattooed historian. Should be a joint project.
Well, there's something that has been discussed, just briefly discussed with even the Unfiltered Historian page itself. But you'll see. I'm
Okay,
excited.
so
I'm excited. It's a very very exciting.
it's in the works, but
Oh, it's
you can't
something's in
know.
the works. Oh yeah, something
Okay, okay.
something is in the works.
Okay, you can tell me
And
though after this is off live. Maybe not. Okay.
maybe
Um,
I want to leave it for your surprise for you too, man. Maybe this is. I think it's gonna be cool, and I really want to keep it. It's kind of.
do you like surprises? I'm not a fan of surprises, but that's just me.
I'm not, but I also just want to let it happen. Like when you people will know on the page, it'll be cool. I think it's
By the
gonna be a
way,
fun thing, and
Hooker is not a fan of surprises either. He would admit that.
I yes, he would, and that's what's really good about Hooker. He knows. Like, I don't care how many pillars in that he gets hit with or knocked out by. He knows
Instead of
he's a good guy.
saying,
He's at least honest about his own mistake, his own shortcomings. He's like, "Well, it was me." I mean, now he also doesn't have fingers to go and point at everybody in the sun because half of them just got shot outside the Chancellor House. So, like, go ahead, blame somebody, man. All of them are either dead or in Fredericksburg, just getting completely annihilated. So, you just lost faith in yourself, and you took it like a champ on the chin, on the head.
yeah,
Yeah, on
however
the
that
head.
works. Instead of getting punched in the face randomly, it's a pillar,
It's
which I think is
it,
worse.
yeah. I mean, it just again, I think, and again, circumstantial too. He does not have anybody to blame because they're dead. It's a little bit of a different situation than some of the other commanders before him.
Yeah, I
It's pretty embarrassing too. I mean, you kind of don't want to go and embarrass yourself and start like throwing around 30 different excuses as to why you couldn't hold Chancellorsville. Just accept it, move on. Like crap. Oops.
hey, you know what? They retained him. He did well at Chattanooga. So I think he kind
That's
of
what I said.
redeemed himself.
I think there's some redemption with Hooker. I definitely am not like an all out Hooker apologist. I think there's just an instance of stupidity at Chancellorsville or
Yeah.
forgetfulness, or honestly, he said it himself. He just didn't think he was capable of finishing out the plans he was implementing. He got cocky. He got overconfident. The confidence was gone. As soon as
So
the attack happens, he loses it.
I think it was Clausewitz. I'm pretty sure Clausewitz said something to the effect of like, well, he described a military genius as having like so many traits, right?
Mhm.
And he said one of those traits is called strength of mind. And arguably it could be the most important trait. And
Yeah, I
the
would hope
trait is
so.
very simple. It just says um, to maintain a clear sight even during battle, right?
Mhm.
It's like maintaining like that calm and just knowing it's going to be okay. And most importantly, don't hesitate.
Yeah, right. Don't do
Do
that.
not hesitate. But that's exactly what Hooker did. So I think Hooker was a good corps commander. Would you agree with that? I don't know. Um,
I think
I thought he did well at Antietam
I did
until he
too.
got
I was then that's it.
shot.
It's again until he got shot. He you
Yeah,
can't really help that. You mean you could by not being in front, but also you can't lead from behind like Longstreet says.
God, I hate it when people are brave. It's like just stay behind the lines. You're a general. You don't have to go.
But
Okay.
was it effective? I mean, it was a seesaw fight, so can't really
No,
go
I
and
know.
say that it was,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it does have that boost. I mean, lead of the rear. I think there's a point where Lee wasn't actually gonna lead it like the fifth time he does this. I think he just knows that he can inspire somebody by like getting ready to trot to the front now that he's done it 4 times and people have grabbed the reins and thrown him back and been like, dude, get out of here. We cannot afford to lose you. Stop going to the front. We'll go. We proved that in the field at Gettysburg by charging up against the angle, damn it. Like, we got this. This isn't a problem. Just let us go. Stop going up in the front and wasting time or wasting our entire cause like that. You want to keep your slaves, dude? You gotta let Lee live. I
Chris
mean, and
Mikowski,
that's what they did.
he
I
brought
think
up
they had that devotion where Lee knew it and played off of it.
Chris Mikowski brought up a really good point. He goes, how would you like to be the guy that had to lead Lee back to the back after doing the whole lead of the rear thing? Could you imagine him just like chewing you out the entire time? Like him just
For the fifth time,
angry
like,
and
imagine if you were the same.
fuming.
Like, that wasn't the same regiment, but like the fifth time that happens. That's what I'm saying. I'm just like, really, it shows the desperation of that army.
Oh
It
yeah,
shows you that
no.
they were done. There wasn't left of
The
them.
yeah, the fact that Lee had to come to the front. It also I think to some extent it also spoke poorly on Lee's part for not. I think his staff structure was really messed up too,
Mhm.
because he did not have the generals even at North Anna. If attrition was a factor in Lee's army, it was against his officer corps. He lost like everybody. Um, and you're right. This goes to your point, right? The Wilderness, Spotsylvania. He loses everybody in that time period. Loses Jeb Stewart,
Yeah, he
loses
loses everyone.
Buell, loses Longstreet. AP
Hold on.
Hill is having another moment.
He has a lot of
Um,
those.
yeah, so you know, it's just kind of like, oh, who do you have? I have I have Jubal Early,
Jubal
the
early.
battle band. That's who I have. And Anderson, who they both just hate each other. So that's gonna go over well. Um, and by the way, that is like one of the most annoying things at Cold Harbor is consistently reading about
Anderson.
their failed attacks on June 6th and June 7th.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we're reaching just about our hour mark here. Just a little under, but that's okay. This is the first of the trench talk, as they call it, and hopefully, I'll have my voice back to be more of a participant and some sleep too, because it's been a very busy work week, and my voice has been gone throughout the entire work week, and I am ready for bed here in the near future. Guys, I do appreciate y'all joining. Nate, thank you so much for coming back again. I know it's on a new platform instead of the last stream we did, but this was cool. I
It
think we should
was.
definitely
I
do this
enjoyed
again.
it.
I just like, shooting the breeze. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for having me on and
Of course.
just letting me talk crap. So
Anytime, man. That's what we're here for. Guys, again, if y'all like what you see, thumbs up. Didn't There's no thumbs down, so just let me know. Y'all have a great one.